Okay, to get back to my question, though. Eisenhower had a meeting, theoretically, with aliens. Truman had given a shoot-down order years before you ever read the study.
Eisenhower never gave that order. That was given by an Air Force general. I can't remember the year, but I believe it was in the early 60s, that an Air Force general gave an order to shoot them down. That order was revoked within 90 days because something like 30 aircraft. Because when we started shooting at them, they had a unique way of eliminating all of the electrical systems in our aircraft. They didn't shoot bullets at us. We shot bullets at them and missiles and everything else. But if we attacked them, they had an incredible scientific procedure where they could literally nullify all of the electrical operations in our aircraft. Now, if you're flying a high-performance jet and you're at 30,000 feet going 400, 500 miles an hour, and all of a sudden everything goes dead. And jet pilots used to share that flying one of those 100 series planes was like flying an anvil. They had no glide capability. They were heavy. They were overly armed, and they were heavy aircraft. The only thing keeping them in the sky was a powerful jet engine that kept them going. So if they lost all of their electrical controls, they couldn't even steer, for God's sake. The plane just began going, as I said, it fell like an anvil. Well, we lost a lot of aircraft. A lot of guys got out. They bailed out in time. A lot of planes were lost. We lost a few pilots.
Okay. So
now, that order to shoot them down was revoked within 90 days.
Right.
And they never issued that again because they learned their lesson. Don't mess with these guys.
Okay, but you're telling me that you read a report in which the military states that their technology is not up to par, so that they can't compete with people that are flying over, invading their airspace, et cetera, et cetera. They don't know, I'm assuming they didn't know what their MO was. They didn't know what they were there to do, right?
Let me tell you briefly what the conclusions of this 3-year study was. They concluded that apparently there was not a threat involved because the repeated demonstrations of technology were so beyond anything we could do or match that if they were angry at us or they're hostile, it'd be over.
Okay, but the logic of that is not, it doesn't fit.
Let me continue.
Just because you can't compete doesn't mean it's not a threat. It still could be a threat.
Let it go on.
Could be an implied threat.
This 3-year study did not find any example of overt hostility on their part.
Okay.
They were not shooting our planes down. We would shoot at them, but they were, poo-poo. It's like throwing little pebbles at somebody, you see? They concluded after the 3-year study that we were dealing not with one group, we were dealing with at least 4 separate groups. Photographs of crashes, retrievals, landings, and contacts, where they had landed and contacted people, indicated that they were humanoid, all of the 4 different groups. Out of the 4 different groups, all humanoid, one group was so human-looking, they just like us. They could sit next to us in a restaurant, they could sit next to you in a theater, and you would never know. That was the ones that bothered the admirals and the generals the most. That these guys could be walking up and down the corridors of SHAPE headquarters, or the Pentagon, or the White House.
Were they?
I have always suspected that, yes, they have been.
Okay, have you met any?
I've met a couple who I am convinced were from somewhere else, yes.
Okay.
But that's another story, and we'd be here till midnight if I got into that. Let me finish with what I was telling you about the SHAPE study. The assessment concluded we were dealing with incredibly advanced technology. We were dealing with 4 different groups, all humanoid, but one group looked totally human. We concluded in this study that they were from somewhere else, another planet, another star system, perhaps another galaxy. We concluded that they did not They were not malevolent or hostile, overtly. They certainly were able to defend themselves. But they did not have an agenda, an aggressive agenda that was hostile, because they had not smashed and torn and broken and destroyed our military.
And this is prior to the abduction scenario that has since come to the fore.
Oh yeah, this was an initial study in '64, based on 3 years of research by the military.
Now, who did the study?
The military.
But who in the military? I'm assuming you weren't part of this.
No, I wasn't. I was working in the war room at Shock.
I mean, was it
the study was underway.
Germans? Was it
the study was underway when I arrived. It was made up of NATO members.
Okay.
There were Germans involved. There were French involved. There were Italians involved.
Scientists?
Americans. They went to some universities and got some of the top people. They got historians, Oxford, Cambridge. They got physicists from several of the top universities in Europe. It was a thorough study. Was
it signed by their, in other words, did they sign off on the study? Do you have names?
The individuals who contributed to it, the bits and pieces, would put initials to, what their particular part to it. That you would have anthropologists, historians, geologists.
Okay, but do you know their names? I don't know if you're going to tell me.
No, I know the names of the guys that I was with at SHAPE headquarters who read the damn thing and signed off on it, yes.
Okay, but what about the ones that worked on
the individuals, I never kept those names because, as I said, this was classified. If I had ever been caught with a piece of paper from this study, I could have gone to jail.
But someone you were working with gave you this to read.
No, I'll tell you how that happened. One morning, 1 or 2 in the morning, we were on these long shifts. I'm bored to death. The coffee was so black you couldn't drink it. The phones are not ringing. The telegraphs were not going off. It was boring as hell. It happens a lot. The old story is military life is 99% boredom and 1% total disaster, total terror. But we were going through the 99% boredom, And I'm sitting there nodding off and read old newspapers, magazines, and all. The controller on duty at the time was an Air Force bird colonel, what we called an 06. All controllers were 6 level. And I ran their duty roster. He looked at me and he went over to the vault and he pulled this thing out and he said, threw it on my desk and he says, "Hey, this will wake you up. Read this." It was the assessment. And it dealt with UFOs.
Okay.
And it concluded that there were extraterrestrials coming here, had been coming a very long time, sometimes estimates of 1,000 years, 2,000 years. Historical records in the assessment itself indicated that the Romans had been paying attention to them 2,000 years ago. So I'm going through this thing, and history was one of my majors when I was in college. Good God, this is dynamite. The more I read, the more I wanted to read, and I went through the whole damn thing. And then later, every time I was on duty in Shock, I would go over to the vault, pull it out, go through it again. As I said,
you have conversations with your office?
We had limited conversations because you could not discuss classified material outside of Shock because there were too many ears.
Sure.
We were having a problem in those days, and let me give you another little sentence, because you could not discuss classified material outside of Shock because there were too many ears.
Sure.
We were having a problem in those days, and let me give you another little side bit here of history. We were in the middle of a vast French spy ring, which, if you really want to do the follow-up on that, you get a book by Leon Uris called Topaz.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
It was made into a movie.
That's right.
Uris laid it out. A French spy ring was going on in Paris. I was there at the time, and we'd find French Air Force officers We found a French general one time in the woods outside of Shape with a bullet hole in his head. Guys were jumping out of apartments in Paris. It was a major scandal. De Gaulle was the president.
Okay, but what was the objective of the spy ring?
The spy ring was Soviet, to find out what we knew that they didn't know. So they had been buying and paying off people all over Europe, Hungarians, French,
so
Germans.
What has that got to do with finding the assessment?
What it got to do is, as a side, is that the UFO issue, no information ever came from Washington or London to Shape headquarters on the UFO matter because of the French spy ring. Everything that came from Washington and London to Paris ended up in Moscow. So the NATO headquarters staff, the admiral, there was a British air marshal, Thomas Pike, was the deputy secure. He was the assistant deputy to my boss, an American four-star general by the name of Lyman Lemnitzer. Sir Thomas Pike, after the incident in February of '61, said, we're going to have to figure what the hell's going on here. We're getting nothing from Washington or London on this issue. We ask, they don't send anything. We ask them for information and insight on these objects. Who are they? What's happening? Nothing. Well, nothing was because everything that came from Washington and London ended up in Moscow, thanks to the French, the Hungarians, and the Germans and all. So the study was initiated strictly as a military idea to conclude what the hell was happening for us here. Is there a threat, yes or no? They concluded apparently not, because these guys had been coming and going for a long time. The History Annex took it back a couple of thousand years. The records, the photographs, the drawings, the paintings, it was unbelievable material. This was all just wild for me, you see.
Okay, but this is after World War II.
Yes.
This is after Germany had, we paperclip and...
Germany was divided.
Okay. And you were on West...
We were Western Europe.
Sure. Okay.
The Warsaw Pact was Eastern Europe.
So are you saying that the technology that was used by Hitler and his group, some of which was brought back to the United States, was not known to the West, to the people in NATO that were doing this report?
Of course not. It was highly classified.
But it's a classified document. So you're saying there is
classification. You have a classified document here, and then you have a classified document here, and the guys who wrote this one and have access to this one can't read that one because they don't have a need to know. Okay. Now the guys that have got this one and wrote it and read it and talk about it, they can't read this one because that's another separate classified document.
This guy Pike, right? He's the guy in charge.
Thomas Pike, Air Marshal Sir Thomas Pike, initiated the study in February of '61 and says,
he had a need to know.
I want to know what the hell's going on, and they started the study.
He's in NATO. There's some kind of animosity, I don't know, to this day between NATO, right, and the U.S. and...
Honey, you should have seen the animosity that existed in Shape headquarters itself.
Okay.
It was so bad that the Greeks and the Turks wouldn't even walk on the same side of the corridor. Cyprus was an issue back then, still is. So we had Greeks and Turks snarling and frowning at each other, and we had the French. Oh, excuse me, bless their hearts. The French were a pain in the butt from the very beginning.
Why?
Well, first of all, de Gaulle hated the fact that Churchill and Truman had not given him the appropriate respect that he felt he deserved. One of the reasons that happened while I was there is that France withdrew from the military alliance. De Gaulle threw us out. We had to pack our bags and move the entire kit and caboodle from Paris to Brussels. And I was there at the time when it happened.
Okay, now where are you reading the report before or after this happened?
I'm reading the report in Paris. Shape was located at a little town called Chatou, Rocancourt, right outside of Paris. Right. Little old Napoleonic battle took place there somewhere. Anyhow, the animosity between the French and everybody else The Germans, the Italians, and the Americans and the Brits were all like this. The French were over here.
But you're saying that the guy who initiated the report is Pike?
Pike.
Okay. And you're saying, I mean, he clearly had a need to know it if he's having flyovers, and U.S. is hearing about this, Britain is hearing about this, the people at the top are hearing about this. So he does this report on his own, or something. That's what it's sounding like. I mean, he had a need to know, so theoretically
he was a 5-star rank air marshal.
Okay.
He had authority to initiate a study like this, and he did.
Okay. Where did it go from there? Do you know? Did it go to the U.S.? Did it go to Britain?
No.
It sat in a safe
They
somewhere?
published 15 copies.
Right.
A copy went to the U.S. First, copy 1 went to the Secretary General of NATO. But you cannot imagine what an international headquarters is like. It's like a wasp's nest. As I said, the Greeks and the Turks were snarling at each other all the time. The French were always angry at everybody.
Okay, so what are you saying? 15 copies?
15 copies were initiated. Copy went to the U.S., copy went to Italy, copy went to France, copy went to U.K., and so on. 15 copies were out. One copy, I think the 14th or the 15th, came right there in the vault at Shock.
Okay.
Reading material for the controllers, the full colonels who ran the 24-hour-a-day war room.
So you weren't the only one that read it?
Oh, no. No, we had an American Air Force general by the name of Robert Lee. Robert Lee read the thing.
Okay.
I got to know his aide fairly well. It was a lieutenant colonel. And inside the war room, we were a select group. We all had the highest clearance possible. The enlisted men and the officers mingled closely. The enlisted men had, the senior enlisted men, most of us were top, E7s or E8s, and a couple of E9s. So we mingled closely, and it wasn't on a first-name basis. There was always respect for rank. But when you work in a war room like that, and you work closely together over the years, you get to know each other pretty well. General Lee's aide told me, he said, when the old man read that story, or read that report, the assessment, he says it hit him like a truck, hit him like a ton of bricks. He told me that the general threw his hat across the desk and he says, do you know what the hell this means? Everything we've got, everything we've done, everything we've had, doesn't mean a damn thing. The shock was pretty serious. Here you have a highly decorated World War II Air Force general who'd been all over the place. I think he flew B-29s in the Pacific. He said, well, if this is all true, if this is real, what we've got, our military, our Air Force, our bombs, our planes, doesn't mean a thing. The conclusions of the study, after 3 years, concluded that they had been coming here for a very long time, that they apparently had some involvement in the origins of our species. Big shock to traditional people, particularly Christians and Muslims people. It was interesting is that apparently there was not a threat involved. If they were hostile or aggressive, they would have been over a long time ago. Now, what was their purpose? Well, the study was not able to